Welcome to the live stream. We had nothing but technical problems. It's the end of 2020. Could not have been a more fitting ending. I have a camera that's mounted above my computer, and I pushed back a bit and toppled it over, and it crashed to the ground. Is this not 2020? I need a new camera for 2021. It's the turn of a page of a calendar, and so be it. Well, welcome to what is called the Year in Review for this particular live stream. And thank you for those of you who have joined with me on various live streams over the course of the year. I would love to kind of recap some of the folks who've been kind enough to spend time with us this year and make sure that we give acknowledgement to them. Look forward to some of the folks who are going to be with us in the upcoming year. So those are some of the things we want to talk about. I just generally want to take a moment and look back on 2020. I know many people tonight are going to be, out with the rubbish of 2020. I think there's a lot of rubbish. It's obvious. There are some good things that came in 2020, and that's the harder part, is to find them, I think, and leverage that to go forward and build on as we move into the next year. So I hope that we will have a balanced recounting of the year that was and the year ahead, and look for both the victories and the challenges in this year. I'd love to know who's joining us today, and I've got some Starbucks gift cards I'm going to be giving away today. So we'll give you some Starbucks gift cards for those who participate in the show. My first question to you is, what will you remember of 2020? The good and the bad. I'd love to have kind of the good, the bad. I don't know if we have to get to the ugly, but certainly the good and the bad of 2020. So if you'd like to just pop some of that into the chat, whether you're joining us on LinkedIn or you're a part of our journey on Facebook or on YouTube, however you're coming to us today, if you just pop in some comments in the comment section, we will move forward with engaging you in this discussion as well. So I'm going to give you my year in review in the sense of, what does this look like from a customer experience perspective? What did it look like from delivering services in the keynote presentation perspective? What did it look like if you were being a creative and trying to write in this year? Some of the areas that I've personally traveled, and I welcome your insights on other industries and other challenges you might have encountered. But for me, I came into 2020 with a very different sense. It was kind of a magical sounding number. I remember working years ago with the senior leadership team at International Dairy Queen, and we were looking at Vision 2020, and it was such a cool thing to talk about 2020 vision, right? And so, it was something out there that had this mystical, soft-sounding, magical quality to it. Little did I know in December 2019, when I was thinking about the year, how it would really turn out. In fact, for me, I had signed a collaboration agreement with Godiva Chocolate. I'd signed a publishing agreement with McGraw-Hill, and we had a book ready to move forward. I would produce it throughout the year. We'd have it available so that it would be released in 2021, which was the 95th anniversary of Godiva Chocolate. So all of this was in plan. Most of the year was going to be spent writing and researching that book. So all was fine. I'd worked with Godiva in the past. I had a leg up, if you will. I'd worked with them in helping them elevate their retail experience. And so it was not uncommon for me to be involved with the leadership team. The CEO at the time had come over from Starbucks. I worked with Annie Young-Scribner when she was over at Starbucks. So it was just a nice fit. And 2020, we'd come into it already having gone to the Godiva Cafes, which was a new concept that Godiva was championing. And I went to the Godiva Cafes, experienced those, saw what they were trying to do to go head-to-head against Starbucks in the morning day part, so you could have an amazing mocha. So that was the beginning of the year. By February, I had planned to go to their production facility in Pennsylvania. They were having their global leadership meeting. I was going to be at the global leadership meeting as well and talking with some folks there. But at the end of February, when this meeting was happening, there was just enough of an urgency about it all that trips to the manufacturing plant were canceled, and they were minimizing the number of people who were going to be at the leadership summit. So I was on pause, and I didn't go to Pennsylvania out of an abundance of caution, a phrase that many of us come to learn in 2020. And having done that, it was kind of a wake-up call, because at the same time, I had all kinds of clients calling me and saying, Joseph, we need you to get on our customer experience task force, or our customer loyalty task force, or we need you to help us adapt so we engage the customers in this time, or engage our internal customer, our team members in this time, whatever it might have been. There was just a number of task forces, and it seemed like I was on perpetual Zoom for the month of March, starting in the end of February, and definitely throughout the month of March. So the world changed, right? There was a pivot point. Now, I am a clinical psychologist by training. So I got my PhD in clinical and systems psychology from the University of Southern California. And I immediately reached out to clients, and I start creating training videos on how to cope with uncertainty. And the training videos were everything from the psychological principles of locus of control to behavioral principles of breathing and mindfulness meditation and the like. And it just created them and sent them to my clients free of charge, because I knew their teams were going to need resources. There was going to be a lot out there. And I thought if I could just curate that content for them with a eye to whatever my skill set has been in that space, and be able to offer it to them. So I was building tools for my clients. I was on task forces for other clients, and I wasn't writing a book. And my goodness, speaking engagements that I had scheduled were getting paused. And that was the original position. It was like, we don't think this is going to be very long, so let's pause these and kind of postpone them to the end of the year. And then as the year went on, some of those got canceled. Some of them got rescheduled into 2021. But speaking in the face-to-face sense of it had all but shrunk. I mean, there's all kinds of risk that was associated with it. So clearly it was a challenge. And look at who I have from the great state of Texas, the premier real estate agent in the state of Texas. Yeah. Is there anybody else selling property in Texas other than Sarah? I mean, I don't know. I don't think you need anybody else. She's amazing. Sarah, thanks for being there, and Happy New Year to you. In 2021, what a challenge. Real estate was an interesting industry. It did pretty well. Go figure. I have a client, as a matter of fact, I'll share this because Sarah's on. I have a client who was already in flow at being able to sell houses completely online. I mean, they had the virtual tours of houses, and you could price point everything. You could, these are all new construction homes. But this builder, you could literally decide, well, we want a different elevation. How much does it cost to do that elevation? Oh, we want different number of outlets in the house. How much does it cost per outlet? And you could actually completely build your house on this builder online, and you could look at your property and all the virtual tools, but you could then hit click to purchase. I mean, to me, this is remarkable. And I know it's been happening in the inventory of existing homes, but wow, it's really kind of crazy to me to see people be able to build a home from scratch virtually. One of those crazy things that happened in 2021. All right, so 2020. So back to this conversation, and thanks, Sarah. For me, part of the business was completely shut down. There was no live speaking. There was a whole other part of the business that was thriving, my consulting business, as clients were desperately trying to figure out how to keep their clients. There was the opportunity to do good that, I wasn't somebody who could help on the front lines in many, many ways. But I knew I could help my clients help their people who could then help their people, right? So I think it was just an opportune time to say, what are my skills? What are my gifts? What are my talents? How do I just donate them to the world, realizing that you don't have to get paid for everything you do? And I think that might have been a real lesson for 2021 for some of us, is that maybe what we just need to do is give first and worry about the economics of it later, and the economics will work out. It always has for me, but it was certainly a call to action in 2020. There's such human need that you just try to figure out, what do you have as a talent? You saw people making masks because they had sewing machines, right? Whatever it was, one of my clients that I've worked with in the past, Bauer, which is a hockey manufacturing equipment company, they weren't needing to make hockey masks anymore because hockey season had stopped, but they converted their tools that made hockey masks and instead made face shields, right? It was that kind of a year. So suffice it to say, for me, it was diving into giving coping skill videos. That was my gift out to the world, if you will. And then I was getting an incredible amount of work on the consulting side, absolute pause on speaking, not much virtual speaking at the beginning because people didn't even understand what that concept was. Plus, people were in front of screens all day long. They didn't want more content, and certainly not to pay for a content that they're used to paying for when it's live. So all that said, not much happening there. Later in the year is more virtual presentations and all of that. For us, this was the first year we got into live streaming. We had for a long time, and we've got Abdullah joining us. Abdullah, where are you joining us from? I'd love to hear a little bit more about that and what's going on in your world these days, and what were some of the challenges you faced in 2020 and how you came through them. So if you want to drop that in the chat, we'll pop that up on the screen as well. So it was this very strange year, right, of things you planned that you had to stop, things you hadn't planned that you had to step into, human needs that you had to just jump into, whether or not there was a economic benefit to you for doing so or not. It was such an intriguing year. And so when the Godiva book went down, and when I realized that I had a lot of time on my hands because I wasn't getting on planes and I wasn't traveling here, yon, and there. I mean, we had multiple international trips scheduled, for example, this year. All that got put off the calendar. So with that in mind, what was I going to do at the time? And since I was having these conversations, really amazing conversations with leaders who were struggling and anguishing and sharing authentically about their pain and their confusion, I decided I better take those conversations and see if I couldn't learn something from them and share what I learned. And so that became the foundation. Let me bend over here to grab this. That became the foundation happened for me in this year, which was this book called Stronger Through Adversity. We just got it out about a week ago, thanks to the expedited efforts of McGraw-Hill. But essentially, that book came about as a result of 140 conversations with my clients and friends of theirs, and ultimately big discussions about how people were coping. And so, again, I never planned on doing a book. I've never contracted for a book, researched a book, written a book, had it released in 5 months. And that's essentially what happened with this. I've never done it in short of a year and a half, I think. I mean, normally I release a book every 2 years, and that pretty much works on about 6 months of trying to figure out who I'm going to do a book about, and then about 6 months of negotiating an agreement and 6 months of research. There's a whole cascade of things. Ed joins us. How cool is it to see Ed? Oh, yes, and it's so good to be here. Thank you so much. Eric is here. I said Ed. Eric, thank you for being here. And gosh, Janice Henderson, one of my clients from way back. And in the new book, speaking of the new book and Janice Henderson, we have the CEO of Janice Henderson. Dick Weil is in the book. And what you're going to love, Eric, was when I was talking to Dick, so thoughtful a guy. I've always really admired and respected him, but he talked about this concept of not eating your seed corn. It's like, what are you talking about? Help me here. And he said, I think you have to cut back, and you have to cut back. You have to be fiscally prudent. You probably should have been before. And if you weren't, you're really going to feel it now and all of that. But when you get into this and you tighten your belt to make sure your outflows don't exceed your inflows, you have to be careful, because you could downsize your workforce and you could get rid of the team that's going to position you into the future. You may end up not investing in things that are necessary to come out stronger through adversity. Just brilliant wisdom from Dick Weil. But suffice it to say, the experience of this year has been to talk to the Dick Weils of the world, right? And to hear their brain processes about how do they come out of the pandemic stronger than they went in. And I got my update from Abdullah. He's in San Diego, having a very calm holiday break with the family. Good for you. Trying to recover from the challenge. Very tiring 2020, drained all of our energies, but definitely taught us a lot. See, I think this is the key. Like, this is a year that taught us a lot, right? If we want to be students of this year. And I think there are going to be people who are just want to bury 2020. Like, I don't want to think about it again. I want to put a box on it. I don't want any of it to seep into 2021, right? I'm so different than that. I want to be stronger through the adversities of 2020, right? I don't want this year to have been for nothing. I don't want all this death, destruction, unemployment, civil unrest, all that stuff to be for naught. I mean, really, if we don't learn from that, I think we're doomed to not be able to benefit going forward. And some of the things, and I'll give my predictions here in a little bit, in the customer experience space that I learned, I think are just necessary. If you don't embrace them, you're going to have a heck of a year. I'm going to jump back to Sarah. So Sarah is part of eXp Realty, and they have over 40,000 agents, unbelievable growth, stock price from $8 to over $65, and www.earnhighercommissions.com to learn more. Still attracting agents, virtual world is the future, and an amazing experience. So what a great year for real estate and for Sarah and for the organization of which she's a part, eXp Realty. All right. So yes, so she agrees not to bury 2020 in the comments. All right, so let me continue on in this discussion a little bit. So for most of us, the opportunity is to learn from 2020, kind of in the wisdom of Abdullah. So what did we learn? I'd love to get your ideas here. Here are some of the things that I learned. That is, technology rocks. I think if you were somebody who's on the fence and you didn't want to go into the cloud, you didn't want to invest in, digital assets, you weren't one to get on camera, all of those kind of things, you were way behind. And it took a lot to pivot, though. I was amazed at how many people pivoted on their digital transformation roadmaps in an expedited time. But one of the things about technology is it rocks as it relates to producing convenience and safety when physical interaction can't be. This was the big thing, right? So will I continue to do curbside purchases on the other side of the pandemic? Absolutely. Will your customers? Absolutely. Will I relish the idea of standing in line when I could set up a virtual appointment? Of course not. Will I want to use contactless payment, not only for the health hygienics of the thing, but just because it's easier to do it that way? I think those are some of the things we learned about technology. Imagine facing this pandemic in the 1980s with your flip phone or your banana phone or whatever it was, right? Or your pager without the cloud computing. It was an amazing year. And in the book, we have people like Microsoft involved. The president of Microsoft's commercial enterprise unit, Matt Renner, talked about how hard 2020 was for him because they had to scale Teams as a collaborative platform at a level they had never, ever expected they were going to have to do in a single year. So, pretty amazing challenge for technology. It was a year for technology to shine. I think for the most part it did. Zoom platforms may have had a little bit of a problem with safety and security for there and some Zoom bombing, but all in all, it really did shine. And collaborative platforms allowed virtual workforces to be productive, despite the fact that many leaders were concerned that you couldn't have a productive workforce unless you could eyeball them. All the time. Without having to use a camera. All right, so suffice it to say, technology is one big takeaway. We need to take into 2021, in my humble opinion, those technologies that make life easier and, for the short term at least, continue to keep us physically safe as much as possible. So that's number one. Number two, technology wasn't enough. Technology left us aching, left us weary, Zoom fatigue, we talk about in the book, a real phenomena. I had literally leaders that I talked to telling me they were dreaming in Zoom. They would dream of getting off of one Zoom call into another Zoom call. A lot of day residue in their dreams, right, of being on camera. So clearly there was that side of it. We could not fully replicate what we wanted to have in relationships, which was more than just a one-dimensional phenomena. We wanted to be able to reach out and touch, and not even touch so much, just to be able to be physically close to someone else. So for me, technology was the bomb, but it wasn't the totality. And so the totality is what? The totality in 2021, particularly as the vaccine hits some critical mass, we get some level of herd immunity, we start to resume some of the physical proximal activities that we had in 2020, in 2019. what I think we're going to see is a greater emphasis on deciding when to use tech and when to opt human. And by that, I mean, I probably am going to discourage my clients from having me fly up to New York City for a day meeting. Now, in 2019, that was not uncommon. Get up bright and early in the morning here in Tampa and fly to New York, get there in, kind of a 11, 12-ish, and then have a meeting in the afternoon for an hour and a half, hop on a plane, get home that night. I'm going to say, I'm not sure that we need to do that. Now, if we want to do a brainstorming workshop for a full day, that might make sense for me to be physically there. And I think you're going to see that in a lot of iterations and manifestations. The technology is going to make it easier for all of those things that we don't need a human to do, but we still need humans. And the humans we need to greet us in ways that make us be seen, that remind us of our humanity. They need to listen to us differently. And another byproduct of this year from my worldview is that people heard each other differently and they asked more of each other. In the book, I talk about Steve Cannon. And Steve Cannon, I used to work with when he was the CEO of Mercedes-Benz USA. And he was so transformational in turning around that customer experience. And then he went over to Mercedes-Benz Stadium, the Atlanta Falcons football team, to the PGA Superstores. He's part of the Arthur Blank Foundation. He oversees the foundation. So just an incredible leader. And while working for the Arthur Blank Foundation and Mercedes-Benz Stadium and all that, he would invite people to Zoom calls with the CEO. So here we are with the technology again, right? And he would invite them to the Zoom calls, but rather than dive in, and oftentimes he'd invite them to lunch or breakfast with the CEO. So there wasn't a business agenda. Have all the other meetings, he'd drop in on all your meetings he couldn't necessarily get to before. Now he can drop in Zoom, but he was inviting people just to have breakfast or lunch with him. And he would start these meetings by saying, please, as you come to the breakfast, bring something from your house that you find really personally valuable to you. And people would bring in their dogs, they bring in their kids. Sometimes the kids came in and their dogs came in even without being invited. But this was an intentional show and tell. They bring in their wedding pictures, things that mattered to them. And what I think started to happen is people realized that in order for me to have you value what this company values, I need to value what you value. I need to listen to what drives you if I'm going to ask you to join us on this journey. And so it was a different kind of listening. And I saw the same listening happening not only from leaders to frontline team members, but from frontline team members to customers, leaders to customers. There was a different level of empathic listening, not just, hey, what do you need? Let's get that taken care of tactically. It was such a fascinatingly positive year. And you see it in so many cool ways. And I'm going to share a little video clip with you right now. I think it's kind of telling, and it collapses a couple of my worlds. So for those of you who don't know, I've been working with Starbucks since I was a pup, and had the good fortune of days with Howard Schultz and Howard Bihar and Orrin Smith, the two H's and an O, the H2O of Starbucks that got it really started. And Howard Bihar is included in the book, for example. We have a senior vice president of community in the book as well. But John Kelly, but beyond those folks, we had just an inordinately fabulous guy who I've worked with back at the Ritz-Carlton. When he was head of quality and head of ops for Ritz-Carlton, he was in charge of customer experience for the Gallup Corporation. He's now a vice president of operations, I believe, at Mercy Hospitals. And he shared this with me the other day. He said, here's where me at Mercy and your world at Starbucks comes together. And I think it's a fitting testament to what happens in 2020. Unfortunately, it involves someone who was lost in 2020, but let's take a listen.
This was supposed to be anonymous. It touched people and inspired people, which led to somebody, going to the local news about this. My mom was the most loving, caring person. She had a fever and was getting short of breath and had lower oxygen levels, and we knew she needed to be admitted. She had developed COVID pneumonia and was pretty sick, but with all of the wonderful medications and wonderful medical care she got, the COVID pneumonia actually resolved, and she was doing so much better. But although her lungs had improved, COVID had made her so weak that the rest of her body just couldn't continue. On November 29th, she was found unresponsive, unfortunately did not survive. We are devastated. My mom was my first best friend, and she will always be my best friend. Learning to live without her is really, really hard. When I'm sad or upset or angry, I usually deal with it by finding a project to help me get through. My mom and I used to love drinking Starbucks together. If I would come visit her, I would stop at Starbucks and get us both drinks. Her favorite drink was a white mocha, and she liked it extra sweet, which I would never drink, but that was her favorite thing. And that was one of the cute, quirky things about my mom, right? She loved everything extra sweet, and it just made us smile. I decided to go to Starbucks and ask them if I could purchase 82 white mochas, and if they would hand those out to the next 82 people that ordered white mochas. I also typed up a letter explaining that this white mocha was being paid for by the family of Harriet, an 82-year-old wife and mother and grandmother, and all her family asks is that people please, please, please follow the CDC guidelines on helping to prevent spreading COVID-19. Because contrary to what some people believe, these things work, and there's scientific evidence to prove that these things work. Yes, I bought mochas and I gave them out, but it's not about me at all. It is about my mom and the almost 300,000 other Americans whose lives were cut short from this horrible pandemic that we're going through. If sharing this story could inspire other people maybe to do kind things for others, or inspire people who aren't following COVID guidelines to actually do them, then it's worth no longer being anonymous and having the story out there. We can all make a difference and try to stop more deaths from happening.
I just kind of love the story. I think it's the great challenge, right? I mean, we want to be able to come out of this year doing nice things for one another. And may that be part of the lesson, as that as socially isolated as we were, we are social beings, and it demands us to find ways to bridge the gap. And that kind of ties me into some of the things that we're going to do in 2021 on the live stream. So I just want to share with you some of the guests that we're going to have on. So in early January, we're going to have Carmine Gallo. I've talked about him a lot on my live streams. Carmine is one of the geniuses about how senior leaders communicate in terms of analyzing their communication styles. And so you'll want to listen to Carmine early January 7th, I think is when we have him on. And he's going to talk about his books like Talking Like Steve Jobs, for example. How did Steve Jobs become so effective? We have Pierre Quinn, who I've been on Pierre's podcasts and live streams in the past. He is really helping business leaders effectively grow. And he does a lot of that on smaller businesses and mid-sized businesses. So he really has the technologies for growth. Bob Berg, the go-giver, somebody that has really focused on that very thing we just heard of in that particular piece, which is how do we do good while we do well? How do we do good in the world so that we can do well as businesses, and not with a mercenary, I'm going to do this so that people will come and see me, but more, how do we do good knowing that the more people we do good for, the more people have an interest in making sure that we're taken care of, kind of the laws of reciprocity, if you will. Terry Paulson was a mentor of mine early in my speaking career. He is an optimism expert, has a leadership style that's very much about telling honest lullabies, about encouraging people to rally behind valleys, but not denying the reality of the thing, maintaining his focus on the positives in a realistic perspective. Later on in the month, I guess we'll be crossing over into February then, and that'll be Sarah Anderson. This is a guest I really am excited about. So for February 4th, Sarah Anderson wrote a book that talks about kind of narrowing the distance. And it is basically a book about civil discourse. It suggests that we have got to a point in our society when we're talking about religion or politics where we are immediately polarized, and we get confused between our opinions and facts. We get confused between our convictions and information. So she had a father who ran for president, was in the primaries in the Republican Party. She works for, I just saw Bill Lampton's joined us. She works out of Atlanta in terms of Andy Stanley's ministry. So she has a strong religious integration and a strong political background, neither of which are we going to be dealing with exactly on the show. It's not like we're going to be preaching or, politicizing this thing. That's not my agenda. But what she does talk about is, how do we ever get to a point where we can dialogue? And what she also talks about is, how do we not go to that place where we just avoid each other? Well, you're red, I'm blue, you're blue, I'm red, so we're not talking. We just can't get along. It's just not going to happen. How do we create an opportunity to narrow that space? Because, unfortunately, certain political candidates, co-opt some of these terms. So I have to be careful about not trying to sound like I'm on one side of this or the other, because I'm really not. But I do think there is a humanity piece here, and there is a kindness piece here. And it should transform beyond our politics and our religion. And figuring out, how do we engage our humanity, and how do we engage our kindness so that we are not avoiding each other or yelling at each other. So anyway, she's going to be my guest. You can see I'm excited about that one, probably. Later in the month, we'll be talking with people. We got Brad Montgomery, who's a magician, kind of a big stage magician by his training, who's come to be one of the most engaging speakers you'll ever meet, because he doesn't just do magic. He definitely uses magic in his presentations, but he talks more about the ordinary magic of life. And how do we capture the naturally occurring magic around us? So it's just a fabulous guy. And then later that month, one of my favorite people in the music world is Tracy Grammer. Not a name you're going to really probably jump off, not a top 40 hit maker, but she's extremely talented, done a lot in 2020 to be on the virtual side, been very effective on the virtual side, has been honing her creative skills, songwriting in ways she hadn't. And we're going to really talk about not so much songwriting or musical performance as creativity. And how do we fuel our muses? And how do we not let our voices get in the way? And how do we trust that creativity in and of its own self is a good thing, even if the output isn't something that everyone wants to consume? So there's that. The great Roger Brooks is going to be here. Talk about people who can help you in business. Roger Brooks will be here. And then later in the month of, I guess we're getting now into March and April, we'll have Ekaterina Walter, who is with Sprinkler. She's a social media maven. She also has written incredible books about brands at the corporate level and individual branding. And then my buddy Sarah Michelle, who got me started in professional speaking way long time ago. I'd been doing the rubber chicken circuit, where somebody asked me if I wanted to go to the Kiwanis Club to speak, and they offered me $100 or they offered me lunch. Either one, it was fine. Particularly, as graduate school, you could just give me desserts. It's probably fine. But she kind of got me into this realization that there is a business associated with communicating thoughts in ways that inspire, inform, and entertain people. So we'll bring her on because she's got a lot to say about that and about her company, Velvet Chainsaw. Kind of an interesting brand title. All right, that's enough for me. Way too much chitter chatter here today, but I did want to take this moment to thank you. Thank you for 2020. Thanks to those of you who have been on my live streams, like Bill Lampton. Thanks for people like Sarah, who joined the conversation actively today. Thanks to those of you who participated in the book. and many of those folks are tuning in as well. So thank you for participating in the book, for purchasing the book, for helping market the book. But most important, thank you for continuing to be information cravers, people who want to do good in the world, who have a commitment to not let 2020 be a wasteland, but to find the threads of learning that allow us to move forward into the next year. 2020, almost behind us. What do we got? Like 11 hours on the East Coast now. 2021, there's going to be a tail, folks. You know, we still got some virus out there in pretty pernicious ways. And so there's going to be a tail. The question is, once we get more and more out of that tail, how do we make sure that we don't forget what we learned this year? How do we not rush so much into normalcy, something called the normalcy bias by neuropsychologists? How do we avoid rushing into it so quickly that we let go of some of the best learnings? How do we make sure that we're still vulnerable, we're authentic, that we're communicating clearly, that we're listening effectively? In the book, I talk about Epictetus, who said that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth because we should listen twice as much as we talk. How do we make sure we listen more in 2021 than we did in 2019, and something commensurate to our levels of listening in 2020? Those are the questions I pose for you as you go into this next year. I hope that you will resolve to make 2021 be a year that you are stronger through the adversities of 2020. Thank you so much for your time. Have a tremendous and safe New Year's Eve.